Having the dog that is socialized enough to go into public places pretty much anytime you want is everybody's dream. Unfortunately, the critical period to socialize a dog is between 3 and 12 weeks old. So what do you do if you have an adult dog who's technically past that critical socialization period? Well, in this video, I'm going to be giving you this step-by-step tutorial in order to show you how to socialize your adult dog. So if you're ready, grab your pen and paper and let's get into it. What's up guys, it's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health needs. I'm a professional dog trainer who works solely with dogs facing anxiety disorders. And in my signature program, the Recovering Rover program, I work with parents working through their dog's anxiety out in the world. But the purpose of this video is to prevent your dog experiencing anxiety out on walks so that your dog is socialized and amicable enough to be able to interact with people out in the world. First, we need to acknowledge that socialization as a word is super vague. Now, scientists use it to describe that critical period between 3 and 12 weeks old, sometimes up to 18 weeks old, where a young puppy is experiencing the world for the first time and getting amicable and understanding what it's all about. But adult dogs and common dog owners, we use that phrase to really describe how dogs interact with other dogs and how dogs interact with other people. The truth of the matter is that socialization, though, is such a big umbrella term, and there are a lot of things that go under this umbrella. Socialization, that phrase, really encompasses different breeds and size and ages of dogs, different races, ethnicities, ages, and sizes of people. It encompasses different attire that people wear, including, cultural clothing and sunglasses and hats and all sorts of different attire. It encompasses different sounds ranging from Priuses to loud construction sounds. It encompasses different environments ranging from wide open fields with barely anything in it all the way to the most crowded places. And it includes different smells and more specific events like even children running and screaming when they play. So socialization is a super broad term. And with so many things that your dog is meant to be socialized to, it can be pretty taxing and intimidating for the common dog owner to know where to start. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you that step-by-step process to socialize your dog the correct way. Let's get into it. The first place to start socializing your dog is actually with your dog's genetics. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to deep dive into your dog's breed history and really get to understand what is their breed most prone to. What are the breeds most prone to liking and disliking? Now, genetics can't tell us everything, and I don't want you to think that just because, Google says that your golden retriever is supposed to be sociable and love every single person that he comes into contact with, that necessarily means that your dog is going to love every person he comes into contact with. However, genetics are the great foundation point. They are what everything builds off of, right? And so if you can just really do a deep dive and understand, is your dog meant to be more of an independent breed? Is your dog meant to actually be interacting with other humans, and that is where they are historically found interacting and working alongside humans? Or are they meant to be more interacting with dogs? Do they tend to be very sociable and they like having groups of dogs together? Now, if you don't know what your dog's breeds are, then I do recommend you start with an Embark DNA test. Now, the reason I recommend to Embark is because they are statistically the most accurate DNA test, but there are others on the market as well. I can't stress to you enough how important it is that you are familiar with what breeds are going along inside your dog. Once you are familiar with what exact breeds are in your dog, then of course you can use a Google search, but I also recommend you check out the dogkey.com, which is a free resource grounded in science. And actually, I also recommend you check out this video that I did with Kim Brophy, who designed the Dog Key, where we talk a lot about how DNA functions and how genetics work in really identifying breed traits. Now, of course, if your breed is meant to be a little bit more independent, maybe your breed is meant to have stranger danger, then that is something you want to be knowledgeable of and aware of when you take your dog out into the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that your dog will have stranger danger, but you just know that, okay, this is something that his breed typically might be prone to, and so we need to be watching out that potentially my dog might not like new people out into the world. And on the other hand, if your dog is meant to really love people and is supposed to be super sociable, and you notice that your dog is indeed very hyperactive and very interested in meeting every new person that he meets, then that is also something to be noted with as well. We're looking for indifference. That kind of leads me to a digression just for a second. I am going to be giving you the steps to be able to take your dog out into the world, but when you do that, what you're really looking for is indifference from your dog. You're looking for very subtle behavior, very chill behavior, as opposed to super enthusiastic or super, on the other end of the spectrum, super shy and sensitive and maybe hiding underneath your feet. So either end of those extremes are not really what we're going for. We're looking for that middle ground there. Now you might be wondering, well, how am I going to be able to read my dog? Well, I do have an entire dog body language playlist linked right here, and I recommend you check that out. Open this link in a new tab and really dig deep into that, because understanding, having at least a fundamental, basic level of dog body language is going to help you. Understanding what the lip lick means, what the yawn means, what a play bow means, understanding what those behaviors mean is going to help you when you decide to take out your dog and really have them interact with new or concerning things in the world. The next step is the experiment stage, and this is really going to probably take you about a week to a month long to do right. This is not a stage that you want to do quickly or just in one little trial. You want to run a couple of experiments. What I want you to do is create a list of all of the different contexts and circumstances that you might want to have your dog socialize to. So for my list, I had men without sunglasses and without a hat versus women with high-pitched voices, men with sunglasses, larger dogs, black-coated dogs, older dogs, all sorts of different situations that I want my dog to be socialized to. And out of that list, I'm going to pick the things that I think are going to be the easiest to start with. What do I think are going to be the things that my dog will be most successful based off of whatever knowledge I have of my dog? And then I'm going to put it on a very mild experiment. I'm going to put my dog out into the world. So let's say hypothetically that you have a golden retriever named Jack. And from everything that you know about Jack, he hasn't indicated any fear of men, right? You still need to experiment more, but thus far, you don't feel like Jack is afraid of men. And on top of that, you also know that Jack's breed is generally more sociable with men. So you're like, okay, so far this seems like this will probably be an easier thing to worry about. So you're going to take Jack out into the world and you're going to have him interact with a man. Now, to be clear, since you're really testing just his interaction with the guy, you don't really want him to be in a crowded environment. You kind of want it to be in a pretty empty environment so that you can really make sure that he's interacting with just the man, and the behavior you're getting is because of the guy and his interactions with the guy. And you're going to do two different experiments. One where the guy is not wearing a hat, not wearing sunglasses, and one where the guy is wearing the hat and is wearing the sunglasses. And you're going to gauge Jack's response, his emotional response to this person. Now what you're trying to do, this is my nifty little example, what you're trying to do is gauge where on this line is Jack's emotional excitement. Is he overly excited? Maybe he's lunging, barking, pulling, throwing a whole tantrum, doing the whole thing. Or is he really sensitive and shy and concerned about his safety? Let's say hypothetically that meeting a man with sunglasses fell about right here, and meeting a man without sunglasses fell about right here, right? And I'm gonna explain this box in a second, don't worry about that right now. But let's say on your spectrum of excitement, that's where you would say. So he's not completely excited, but he's not really sensitive, he's like right here-ish. So you think, okay, cool, now I'm going to do all of the other experiments, and I'm going to do the same thing where I am marking them on my nice little list, on my little spectrum. So now you have this nice little list that looks something like this, right? Where you have a whole bunch of lines and it's all kind of on this spectrum of super, super excited because he's jumping up and down, whether he's too happy or because he's extra reactive, whatever it is, he's super stimulated, all the way to very sensitive and shy and reserved. And you've kind of done all these experiments. Now, I want to be clear, some of these experiments you may have to do more than once, like on a different day, or see how it goes. And of course, things can move around on a lot of different variables, but this is okay. The chart is just for you. No one else is going to see it. It's just for your frame of reference. I also want to mention that you're really taking things in control. So you're not like, you wouldn't jump from testing with one person all the way to testing with 25 people in a crowd, right? You're really controlling it and gradually increasing the difficulty as you go. I also want to mention that you would not go on to the next difficult thing unless what you just did had a passing rate. Now you might be thinking, what does a passing rate mean, Jenna? Well, I'm glad you asked. That would be anything that falls in this little box. Our goal is to try to get as many things inside this little box zone as possible, inside this neutral zone area as possible. And let's say hypothetically meeting one person out into the world meant that he was able to do that with a pretty mild, okay excitability, and that fell inside the box. Well, that means that the next time you go out, you can try having him engage with someone who's a little bit more difficult. Maybe they have a high-pitched voice, maybe they are wearing all sorts of shenanigans, and see that. But the second that something falls out of this box range in one of these sidelines, that means, okay, we've basically hit our limit for right now. I don't want to try to increase the difficulty of the person that he meets too much. Our goal is to stay in this happy square zone for as much as possible in the experiment stage. Now, I am going to be showing you how we start working on the things on this outside, so we're going to get to that. But for right now, we're just trying to get as many things in this box as possible without testing too much excitement or too much fear. And that's really another digression that I want to take just for a second. The reason you don't want to test too many things that fall out here, the reason you don't want to have those experiences so much is because extreme emotions tend to have very long lasting results. So let's say the big black dog, for example. When we took Jack out, we realized that he was incredibly reserved around large black breed dogs, right? And what we found was that this caused him to have a hunched position. He really looked shy and he was just not happy. Well, if we keep putting him in situations where he's around this large black dog, he is going to learn that large black dogs are scary and bad. And now we have him having this predictive behavior where every time he sees a large black dog, he starts having a fear response or starts getting anxious. And this can make training much more difficult. So once you find something that is outside of that range, you take a mental note of it and you go, okay, this didn't fall in the box range. This seems to be a more extreme response. This is something that I'm going to need to work on, but for the time being, while I'm getting this sort of data, if you will, while I'm understanding exactly where my dog is in the socialization realm, I need to make sure that I'm limiting how many times he comes into contact with large breed black dogs. Okay, so at this point you have made it through the experiment stage and you have your long list of experiments that you've run. You know which experiences cause your dog to become too stimulated or too sensitive, and you know which experiments or experiences are going to make your dog just kind of mildly attentive. Now we're going to start the training process. We are entering phase 3. And in this phase, I want you to deliberately start off with the things that your dog is most successful at so far. What is your dog doing well and is handling correctly at this point? The reason is because we want to give our dog as much success as we possibly can before we start increasing the difficulty. And we want to make sure that our dog is understanding sort of a fundamental level of what is expected of him when he enters the world and interacts with different sounds and different people and different size dogs, right? So this phase 3 is the desensitization phase. And what we're doing is we're just going to focus on all of the activities that fell in this little box. If it didn't fall in the little box, then we're going to put it on the back burner and worry about it a different day. And that really means that you are eliminating how often your dog is experiencing those things for the time being. And you're just going to pay attention to the things that fall in that black box. And you might be thinking, yeah, but they were passing, my dog did well. Why would I want to pay attention to those? And the reason is because two things. One, you want to make sure that your dog continues to do well in this context, right? You want to make sure that he doesn't start to become overstimulated or too reserved in those situations. You want to make sure that his interaction with the guy without sunglasses stays solid. That's number one. And number two, you also want to make sure that your dog knows what behavior is expected of him. So for example, when your dog goes up to meet that man with the sunglasses, you want to make sure that he's doing it in a way that he is doing the engage, disengage correctly. So I do recommend, if you don't know how to get your dog to meet people properly, check out this video where I give you that explanation. But that would be the exercise that you would want to do in this situation. And this is really where we're training our dog to know, how do we greet people properly, or how do we sit at the park, how do we do stays at the park. This is really where we are doing the behavior element of it, but we're only worried about the behavior on the things that he did pretty well before. You are not expecting the behavior element out of the things that he had an extreme emotion just yet. So in this phase 3, it's really about getting your dog exposed to those different experiences that he might come into contact with, say a lady who is, clapping her hands, or is out walking with a child, right? All of these things that are mildly stimulating for your dog are not too arousing or too emotional just yet. You're focusing on the things that are mildly stimulating, and you're getting exposure to them while also implementing those basic skills that many dogs need. Now, as you move into phase 4, that is really where we're going to address those extreme emotions, and I'm going to walk you through that as well. But I want to be clear that you don't have to have all of the experiences that fell into this box, all of these mild excitement behaviors. You don't have to have those experiences down perfectly before you move into phase 4. That could take a very long time. You can sort of work on some of the mild activities or mild experiences, and then also work on the extreme experiences as well. It's just that you want to make sure that you have a good foundation in the mild experiences first. You want to make sure that your dog is progressing well, that you're communicating effectively, that your basic skills are right, and that your dog is, for the most part, progressing in the way that you want. Then you're going to tackle those extreme experiences, and that moves us into phase 4. For phase 4, you're going to use a technique called counter conditioning. Counter conditioning is the process of switching the association of a trigger first, and then worrying about the behavior element of it. So let's take Jack's scenario. When we took Jack out, we saw that when he came across a woman with a high-pitched voice, he became overstimulated and he just lost his mind. He started jumping, he was excited, he was like, oh my gosh, get me to that woman, I must meet her, right? And we go, wait, we don't want this. This is too extreme of an emotion. So we are going to first try to get that extreme emotion mild down. That association needs to be less exciting, less happy, and just a little bit less stimulating, right? So our goal is to take all of these things that are on the outside of the box and get them into the box. We're gonna try to mild down the associations of all of the things that are outside the box, mild down those experiences, and put them into the box first. That's our number one goal. To do this, you're going to set your dog at a far enough distance where your dog is no longer experiencing the extreme emotions, so that he's no longer lunging, he's no longer jumping, he's no longer barking, he's no longer shying underneath your feet. You're not seeing that extreme emotion. That's how far back you need to be. Now that far back could be 10 feet, that could be 5 feet, but you want to back up a little bit. And when your dog engages with the trigger, so when your dog engages with the person with the high-pitched voice, you know, maybe she says hi and she says it really high-pitched, you will yes and feed. So that means that you're going to say the word yes, and then you will offer a treat. Now, you might also recognize this as the engage-disengage game, which is a pretty popular game created by Leslie McDevitt. And actually, in a couple of weeks from today, I'm going to be releasing a deep dive explanation on how to do counter conditioning. And if you're watching this video in the far enough future, then it is going to be linked right here. And I recommend that you open that in a new tab and watch it. If you're watching this before that video is released, make sure you hit subscribe so that you get notified when that bell or when that video drops. Also, I recommend that you go into the description box and download my free case study where I talk about desensitizing one dog named Levi. He was triggered by other dogs out on walks, and I have a full explanation, full case study explaining what I use and what I do to desensitize that experience. So I also make sure that you download that in the description box as well. However, for the purpose of this video, what I want to say is, when your dog is engaging with the trigger, you're going to yes and feed, and you're going to reward him simply for looking or hearing or seeing the dog or the trigger. And the reason is because you are creating the association that that thing over there has a positive outcome. And most importantly, that positive outcome comes from my human up there, right? That every single time I see something that is causing me to be really stimulated and I just have a sensation that overwhelms me, I know I can check in with my human because they're going to give me something that I like. The awesome part about this is that if you reward every single time your dog is engaging with a trigger, then you will get an auto check back in. Your dog is going to start to anticipate that that thing gets him a treat. And what will happen is you can start to delay your yes, you can start to delay your word and have your dog just naturally check back in on you all on their own. How long you're in this phase of counter conditioning is dependent on a lot of variables, including what emotion your dog is experiencing. You know, is it fear? Is it sensitivity? Is it concern? Those experiences are probably going to take a little bit longer to counter condition. However, you know, it also depends on your dog's history with that trigger as well. So how long have they been able to rehearse that arousal, rehearse that overstimulation? That said, once you do feel like your dog is like getting it, you're like, okay, they're checking back in with me, and you know, this is not as stimulating, this is not as concerning, then my friend, now you get to move this thing that was once very stimulating and causing your dog to be crazy, you get to move it inside that box. And guess what happens once you're in that box again? You get to go back to phase 3 where we're really working on the basic skills element of it, right? Once we've taken those high emotional experiences, desensitized them, put them at a milder rate, now we can focus on the basic skills part. We can really make sure they're understanding the manners. This is where we can work on loose leash walking. This is where we can work on the obedience part of it, right? So it's not fair to expect those harder challenges like, you know, sit or loose leash walking or stay. It's not really fair to expect those skills if your dog is experiencing an emotional rush. And if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, then I recommend you check out this video right here where I really deep dive on the brain chemistry and what is happening when your dog is becoming excitable and when he sees a trigger and he starts lunging and he starts pulling and he starts barking. What is happening when all that is going on? There's a lot of brain chemistry happening in that moment, and I explain it in that video, so check it out. An important thing for you to realize is that socialization is really just about getting your dog experiencing new, interesting, or relatively unusual events to the dog, right? He's experiencing those things, and the first thing that he's doing is he is assessing his safety. Before he can worry about what even behavior he's supposed to do, the first thing his brain is going to do is this a safe thing for me to engage with? Then once he's engaging with it, then he has to realize, how do I engage with it? So there's a lot of problem solving in this experience. Some things will come easier to him than others, and that has a lot to do with his life experiences and his genetic basis. So you will see that some things he encounters and he's just like, yep, that's cool, I know exactly what to do with that. And then other things and other experiences in the world he's going to engage with, and he's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. The important part is to be patient with your dog and to really be sympathetic and supportive of him and the emotional experiences that he's going through, the logical, critical thinking skills he has to work through as well. If your dog is experiencing one of those extreme emotions, either super sensitive or is experiencing a lot of happy enjoyment and is just bouncing off the wall, or perhaps your dog is experiencing frustration, anger, fear, any of those things that is causing your dog to be highly reactive, potentially aggressive on leash. If that's you, then you might be interested in my Recovering Rover program for reactivity and aggression, where I coach you on how to get your dog to walk out in public without becoming heavily reactive to triggers. And if you're interested in checking out that program, you can go to getacalmdog.com to check out and learn more. Don't forget to get your free download of the Reactive Dog case study, and if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. Consider subscribing, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video, and I'll talk to you soon.